Thank you, and thank you, Senator and Ms. Stark. So I'll start with the Senator, if I may, and thank you for the work you've done in the PFAS remediation and environmental policy work. I was just wondering, in that context, what are some lessons, and it goes on to the question from my colleague, the Honourable Scott Barrett, what are some lessons you would convey to us, or what advice would you offer to New South Wales lawmakers about building bipartisan support and public trust in that PFAS policy reform?
My advice is be persistent, because you're on the right side of history here. And what I've always said is I place the health of my constituents over the profits of the companies that have known for decades that these chemicals are toxic. Ms. Stark can provide you with all the talking points to counter every ridiculous argument that they will throw to try to prevent this legislation from passing. But you can't discount the necessity to take every measure you can to protect the health of your residents and constituents. And that's what I'm doing, and I drew a hard line. I would not back down. I'm a reasonable legislator. I can make deals and compromises on just about everything. But on this particular law, I drew a hard line. And I think Ms. Stark saw that in action a few times when we were negotiating this, and my colleagues across the aisle understood it as well. So, I mean, just stick to your guns. You're doing the right thing.
Ms. Stark, I'll go to you as well. I think you probably have some stuff to say to this too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, you have to be honest. We really had situations where our opposition would come in and tell part of the truth, half of the truth, and then we took it very seriously that we should continue that truth. So an example of that would be they came in and said, California vetoed this bill, period. And then I testified and said, that is accurate, but the governor of California also said it was a good bill and he wanted to sign it. The only reason that he didn't was because they were in a budget deficit, which was not the situation we were in Minnesota. We had a surplus. And so I would say be honest. You know, we worked really, really hard to work with members of the Republican Party, even though we had a Democratic trifecta. We had the governor, the House, and the Senate. And we went in with our GOP lobbyist who said Ivana can have whatever she wants. She has a trifecta. She has the House, the Senate, the governor, but she wants to work with you. So we purposefully took the partisanship out of this on day one because nobody wants their kids exposed to this. Nobody wants to be exposed to this themselves, regardless of what party they're a part of. And at the end of the day, I think the story of this young woman, Amara Sturandi, who spent these last few months of her life walking the halls of the legislature and telling her story. She grew up in the Plume area. She was diagnosed with cancer when she was 15 years old. The doctors expressed to her family that had they caught it early, she might have had a better chance. So we are huge advocates of medical monitoring here. Amara could have been any of our kids. She could have been any of our sisters. And she spent those last days telling her story. And I think left, right, and center saw themselves and their families in Amara. So, you know, my advice would be honest, reach out, ask for help. You know, the science is there proving that we are on the right side of history, as Senator Seeberger said. And we take this partnership really very seriously.
Thank you, thank you. And as a follow-on, how did you ensure that vulnerable or low-income communities were included in those PFAS-related decision-making and remediation efforts? Because sometimes they're the voices that aren't heard. How did you ensure that those voices were part of that story?
Absolutely. Clean Water Action at that time had an environmental justice organizer who really helps connect us to those most at-need communities to lift their voices up. The thing about PFAS is it does really hit everyone, regardless of your income and your background. And so we elevated all of those stories. We had a situation where in the East Metro, it was one particular high school that was hit so desperately hard. And so those were the voices we lifted up, but we absolutely keep front and center the need to fund these remediation projects in every part of our state. Absolutely. We are having a crisis right now on some of the indigenous reservations, for one elementary school in particular with extraordinarily high PFAS levels. And those are, we are working our hardest to communicate with that community and see how we can offer help and assistance.
Thank you. I have other questions, but I will go to the chair because I know other people have questions. Thank you so much.